Okay, so this one was recorded just after the last one, but it's on the next day, so it's, I don't know, Wednesday, maybe? Time is hard. I think they just make it that difficult to, discourage time travel. Probably. Or just to feck with me. That's equally as likely. A quick thank you to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Data Magnet, Cat Crab Lobster, Duck Machine, Try Again 95, Astray the Dreamer, Mesic, Budic Joel, German Chemist, Casper Arnholtz, and Chaos to Must. Thank you very much. Anyways, on to the story. The Care and Feeding of Humans, Part 9. Time is a variable element for humans. One human once explained it by saying, "Put your hand on a hot stove for a minute and it seems like an hour. Sit with a pretty girl for an hour and it seems like a minute." The chemical soup that lives inside humans also allows them to slow time down to a very slow pace in times of emergency, allowing them to move, think, and act faster than their normal human reflexes would allow. Dubiak Review of Ontological Species Studies, The Care and Feeding of Humans, Keeping Time in a Bottle, published by Glass and Steel, The Care and Feeding of Humans, Translation Engine 3.14159. At lunch, Nerov stopped by where Rurul was eating. "Hey, Rurul," she said, as she slid onto the bench next to him. "I need a discreet favor." Rurul paused, his spoon partway up to his mouth. "How discreet?" "I have no idea. You tell me." Nerov slid an envelope across the table to him, and he picked it up and looked inside. "Oh, that is discreet," he said, after reading the note and counting the money. He glanced over to where the humans were sitting for lunch. He slipped the envelope into his pocket and nodded. "I think I can do that. I'll send you something tonight." "If it's not enough, then let me know," Nerov said, but Rurul just shook his head. "This is fine. I charge less for the interesting jobs," he said, and then smiled and went back to eating. Nerov took a cue and slid away from him and then headed over to join the humans. That evening, when the humans headed to the gym, Zoe had paused as she grabbed her goggles. "You should join us, Nerov." "Join you? Why, you mean working out?" Nerov asked. Zoe nodded. "You and the boys, you should work out with us." "Hey," Alan's face brightened. "That's a great idea. Come on, it'll be fun." That was, as far as Nerov knew, the first time that Alan had lied to her. Working out was not fun. She'd called Quereth and Teref to join her, because if she was going to have to suffer to bond with humans, by all that was sacred, they would too. Zoe, after her look at Nate, had pulled on her goggles and started running again. Nate turned to Neref and the boys. "Great. How are you guys at climbing a rock wall?" It turns out that Teref was pretty darn good at climbing a rock wall. "Must have some monkey in your gene pool, Teref," Quereth had taunted. "You are just jealous that monkeys never showed up in your family tree," Teref had gasped while hanging from the wall. Quereth, of course, had taken to the fake water. It was actually real water, but it flowed at a force through a tiny rectangular pool. If you were wearing the goggles or shut your eyes, you could pretend that you were really swimming. Nate had called it an endless pool, and Neref understood the concept once she saw Quereth swimming in it. No matter how far you swam, or you would never reach the end of it. "Okay, Neref, now you. What do you want to try?" Nate asked, rubbing his hands together. "Surfing, boating, weightlifting, or running?" Neref scratched her forehead where one of her feathers was tickling her. "Why, exactly would I ever want to use a boat or a surfboard when I can swim?" "Well, because it's fun. Or because the water's too cold for swimming," Nate explained. Neref stared at him blankly. "Too cold to swim," she repeated, just to be clear. "Well, yes. If the water is near frozen, you're going to want to use a boat or a kayak or something, unless you're part penguin and don't care about the cold." Neref shook her head. She remembered one time when the water temperature dropped to a little below 25 C, and that was a little chilly. But the concept of frozen water. She knew ice, of course, and used it in drinks, but had never wrapped her head around the entire ocean of ice. Nate saw her puzzled look and shook his head. "Never mind. But after this expedition is done, we'll take you to Earth and you can see an iceberg carving. Then you'll understand kayaks." Neref had understood all the words that Nate had used, but she couldn't place them in context. except for the part about her visiting Earth. Why would any sane person want to go visit Earth, she thought. Just as Quaff shouted, "She's the head of our nest, we get to come too." "Okay," Derek said, "let's put the boats and stuff out of the picture for right now. The heavy kick doesn't seem fun, but I guess at least the treadmill could be useful." She slipped on her goggles and started to run on the treadmill. She was no fool and wouldn't try and match Zoe's endurance, but she could at least. She stumbled a bit as the scene came up. She was running through a forest, dirt and leaves under her feet and giant trees towering overhead. "What is this place?" she asked. "It's beautiful." Alan made to have taken a break from helping Tara on the wall because he startled her, his voice coming from right beside her. "The goggles say Redwood Forest Earth." "Oh, did you do that to make us feel at home?" he asked. Tara swallowed. "It's standard protocol, but I never realized how beautiful Earth was. Nothing is going to jump out and chase me, is it?" Alan laughed. "You should be fine, it's just a jogging program." After 15 minutes, Nerif was forced to stop. She was panting heavily, trying to cool down, and her feathers were fluffing out and smoothing down, trying to circulate the air to cool her off. Her legs were a little wobbly, and she sat down. Tariff and Quirrif were already sitting down on the bench by the door, watching the humans. Quirrif, she noticed, seemed perfectly fine. Of course, he'd been swimming in water. Tariff was still panting a little, so she didn't feel so bad about her panting. "You guys did great," Alan said, walking over to them. "Tomorrow you should switch it up and try something new." "Tomorrow? Sure." Nerif smiled, a pale copy of her normal smile. After Alan headed back to one of the torture devices, Nerif mattered to the boys. "Tomorrow, I get the fake water." The next day, Nerif was sore in places she didn't know existed. This, even though she and the boys had used the rejuvenation pod last night before bed. Quirrif seemed fine, she noted sourly, and Nerif only winced if he had to use his arms, but Nerif hurt everywhere. As they headed for breakfast, Zoe noticed her pain. "Nerif, I hope you're going to be swimming tonight." "I am," Nerif said firmly. Zoe made a gesture with her hand, and Nate and Alan broke away from the group to fetch food and drink for everyone. "Zoe, how is it that you have become the leader of the humans so quickly? You didn't even know each other 2 days ago." "Easy," Zoe said with a smile. "Our first night on board, I brought a fine selection of beers over to the boys' quarters. We drank, and once they were sufficiently drunk, I convinced them that I should be in charge." "Convinced nothing," Nate groused as he brought a food pack. "She pulled rank, plain and simple." "Pulled rank?" Quirrif asked. "Oh, are you the oldest, Zoe?" Zoe turned a cool gaze on Quirrif, and Nerif kicked him under the table. She glanced at Zoe and smiled as Quirrif said, "Oh!" "You're right, Zoe. Kicking works very well," Nerif said. She turned to her nester. "You never ask a human female about her age." "Oops, sorry, Zoe," Quirrif said, though it was hard to tell how authentic his apology was, since he ducked his head below the table to check the damage to his leg. "No problem," Zoe said. "We didn't discuss age. I have the most mission experience, so I'm in charge." After breakfast, the boys headed out to do their jobs. Tariff promised them something special for lunch. Nerif kept an eye on the humans. And that's the way the days went. About a week in, they started getting live images from the ground station. Sometimes Quirrif couldn't take the evening workouts because he was running landing and docking simulations. Sometimes Tariff begged off, claiming to be working on a new recipe. Since he always presented something nice at breakfast, Neren didn't call him out on it. But she did notice that he only had to work on the special recipe on nights when he was supposed to be using the treadmill. Nerif attended all the workouts. Swimming was actually fun. Rock climbing was challenging. She never did get surfing down, and the treadmill was the bane of her existence. Zoe only ever used the treadmill, and Nerif was afraid to ask if it was because of her arm that she had to avoid water and rock wall climbing. And then it was the night before landfall. "Just a light workout tonight," Zoe declared. "Make sure you're packed before you go to bed and that you have everything your packing lists checked off." Alan had given everyone packing lists 2 days ago, and Nerif had immediately packed her bags. That night, In bed, Querif and Terif dropped off to sleep immediately, but Nerif couldn't do it. She finally got out and headed up to the common room, hoping to find a soothing drink to help her sleep. At this time of night, the common room should be empty, but she wasn't surprised to walk in and find Zoe sitting at one of the tables, drinking a cup of something that smelled wonderful. And that was how, on the night before landfall, Nerif had her first cup of hot chocolate. She and Zoe drank in silence, and Nerif wondered if she should bring up the info that Rarul had gotten about Zoe. Instead, she let it slide, and the two of them just shared the night and the chocolate, and whatever worries they had about tomorrow, they kept to themselves. End of chapter. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed.